Budgeting. What are the budgeting best practices? Now, you're probably going to find it maybe a little strange for you to hear a CFO type to say, I don't like workbooks, but I don't like workbooks. And the reason why I don't like workbooks is that you spend so much of your time as a CFO or anybody using them fixing errors. And what version do we have? And oh, my version has this sales forecast. Oh, that's not the sales forecast we need. Or gee, this cash number just doesn't make sense. Well, that's because this formula over here missed a whole bunch of collections. Workbooks are just problematic. And the more you have and the more complicated they are, the more problematic they get. And so it wasn't until recently that there were platforms available online that were affordable by SMBs, small businesses, to do this kind of thing. But there is definitely one out there, and we work with them a lot now. It's called OnPlan, and it just eliminates that whole spreadsheet headache. And it is a huge headache, and it's also a big waste of time, because if you're spending all this time making sure that your spreadsheets are working correctly, you're not spending a lot of time analyzing them and figuring out the business and where it's headed. So that's kind of point number one. Point number two is, from a best practice, is to make sure that it integrates, or ETL stands for extract, transfer, and load. It's a fancy word for export and import, but whatever it is that you have, it needs to talk the same language as your accounting system. So if you're budgeting based on that chart of, that presentation I gave you a few minutes ago on the P&L, you want your budget to look exactly the same. And you don't want any differences where somebody's got to fudge it between the two. So your budget should tie absolutely back to every account on your accounting system so that you can do a proper budget versus actual, which is really the next one. So focusing on cash flow as well, you got to make sure that whatever P&L you're putting together is translating into a cash flow forecast that is reliable. Nothing worse than coming across and saying, well, we've got enough runway to run for the next 6 to 8 months, and then somebody pops up, a month later and say, actually our runway is only 2 months. That's a horrible situation to be in, and it may be exaggerating it a little bit, but I've run across situations where not having a proper cash flow, you want to talk about driving your car in the dark without headlights. This is like if you add fog to it. So, just imagine how, not knowing where you're going and not have any idea what's right in front of you. That's what not having a cash flow forecast along with a budget would do for a company, in my opinion. And then starting that habit of actual versus budget early. You may think, hey, we're really small, we don't have to worry about that. I'll tell you what, I would. And the reason I would is it creates a habit. Habits are very hard to form if you don't have one. And so if you're not in the habit of doing an actual versus budget from the very early days, it's going to make it a lot harder for you to get into that habit later on. And not only that, for your department heads and the people that are in charge of major functional areas, everybody needs to know and should be managed on how are they controlling their expenses. Are those expenses actually going towards supporting the company's mission and its strategic objectives? And if you don't know whether you're on target or not, it's like, it'd be like a football field without any goalposts. You just don't know whether you're making any progress or not. Without any lines on the field, you have no idea if you're moving it downfield. So to me, this is a big one to start off early. And then using rolling forecasts. So take your actuals, bake them into the rest of bake them in so that you can say, this is what we've done this year so far as of June or whatever, and here's what the next 6 months look like, so that you've got an accurate view of where you're headed. If you had an EBITDA target, or if you had a profitability target, or you had a gross margin target, making sure that you have those actuals built into what's left of the year or the frame that you're looking at is going to tell you whether you're going to hit your numbers or not. And if you're not going to hit your numbers, you should know why. So those rolling forecasts become really important, especially as you scale, and help really manage the scale, because it tells you, for example, right now, let's say you're a company and you've been running along at 6 or 8 people, and now you've got $5 million dropped into you by an investor. Did you actually put a forecast together that baked that in there so you know exactly what you're going to do with that head count, exactly what tech stack you need to buy? Rolling forecasts really help bring those kind of, oh, gee, we've got all of a sudden we got our A round closed sooner than we thought. What do we do with the money?